I want to ask, who's experienced major change in their life? Put up your hand. It means like you changed your career, changed countries, you've gotten married. I think there are going to be more hands. Divorced. Had kids, maybe not in that order. So some changes are quite minor and easy to cope with, and others are quite major, and they're really complex and hard to get through, and sometimes they require great behavior change. And today we're talking about, and I think about that, I visualize going across a bridge to get to the other side, building a bridge to get across to the other side. Now today, it's Mandela Day. You know, we're celebrating his birthday, his legacy, and his values. And I thought it was appropriate to bring that home. Because let's think back to February 1990, when Mandela was released from prison after 27 years. And his next job after that was to bring forth democracy out of the ashes of apartheid. It's unthinkable, actually. If you put yourself in his shoes, it's unbelievable. And that's what he did. He built a bridge and brought us across to our first free and fair elections. Almost nobody thought that that was possible. But it happened. It felt like a miracle at the time. And then there was another bridge to cross, which was to create prosperity for all in a country where the majority of the population had been marginalized, not just for decades, but for generations. And so that was the next piece, and that's, of course, the topic of today, which is SDG 9, which looks at inclusive industry and infrastructure and innovation. So, again, I want to delve back a bit. When Mandela was released, or around that time, in the early 90s, I was working for the South African trade union movement. I was lecturing economics, and I was doing my PhD in economics at Manchester. And at that time, there was a whole crew of South African economists, also at University of London, and they were getting ready to take up positions of power and lead, the future of the economy. And I was part of that whole group. And in the country, there were all these debates about the future of growth. Anyone who was there will remember growth with redistribution, growth through redistribution only, or with growth. We just went around in circles. But there was a lot of debate, and there was a lot of contestation. We were young and maybe naive, but very, very full of hope. And since then, for about 30 odd years, I've been working more or less as a development economist. And in different guises, I was on the South African National Planning Commission, part of writing the National Development Plan, located in the presidency. I led a think tank for a very long time, looking at how to solve for unemployment. I've been in leadership positions in major development projects and policy initiatives. And I was even chief of strategy at a state-owned telecommunications company orchestrating its turnaround. And over those years, there's been some successes and some progress forward. But I'll be honest, it feels like more often than not, there's been progress, and then something stops, and it goes backwards. I've experienced that so many times over the years. And when you spend your whole life doing that, it's frustrating, but not just for the practitioner, for the country, because it feels like you're not making the kind of progress you could. I think that South Africa really has a lot of potential and a lot of capability, but somehow we just keep seeming to reverse. And I've been thinking a lot about that over the years, because I'm always coming up with technical solutions. That's my core business. But over the past period of years, I've been thinking that actually it's not a technical problem. I think our core problem is actually that we're stuck in unproductive behavior that's predicated on historical behavior. We can't seem to get out of it. And I think it sticks us in the mud. So I'm going to talk about how to build a bridge out of that and get movement forward. Now let's think back to what apartheid was like, because it's relevant for the industrial question. Now, as much as we were talking about Maponya recently, and the rules changed over time, but there was a very long period of time when, if you were black, you couldn't own a manufacturing facility. You could have one store, and what you could sell was prescribed. It would be stuff like soap or matches. It was stuff like that. You couldn't own two stores. If you were black, you most certainly were not selling in a white area. And when I say it was illegal, I don't mean like if you were in Latin America and they just ignore you. It really was a police state. They would shut you down and throw you in jail. The black artisan class was pretty much killed off from the 1950s or 60s. Education was truncated. You weren't really supposed to get more than a grade 10 education, because why would you need it? And if you did, maybe you could be a priest or a nun or a teacher. That was pretty much it. So if you want to have a low growth, high unemployment economy, that's a perfect way to do it. That's how you would design it. And it showed, because South Africa had maybe 1% growth on average per capita since 1960. So it showed. There was never collapse. We never had a Venezuela kind of situation. There was never any major collapse, but we just chug along in this kind of loose, stagnant, low-level situation. So we have this aspiration which says we want to change that. We want to reduce poverty. We want to raise living standards for everybody. And that was what freedom was fought for. It was what Mandela fought for. It says so in the Constitution. The National Development Plan says so. It was adopted by all parties in Parliament and Cabinet. It was reasserted last month after our general elections. And for a long time, there really was big improvement. And we had growth. And unemployment fell from about 30% in the year 2000, to about 23% in 2007. Poverty fell. Government capacity was growing. Our exports were starting to diversify. Industry was starting to grow. So there was a lot of progress forward, and then there wasn't. So 2008, sure, there was a global economic crisis, but that doesn't explain things. There was a lot of reversion after that, and we sprang back to that 30 plus. Now unemployment is more than 30%. It's more than when we started this project. So you can imagine, as someone who's been working on unemployment for her whole life, how you have to think about what's that about. Because I thought we wanted to solve for this thing. And that's what I mean when I refer to the Constitution. We said we wanted to do this thing, but maybe we didn't. What's going on? So there was a lot of reversal. And then the question is, what is that about? And the fact is that the lived reality for most Black South Africans is one of high unemployment, very deep poverty, and limited access to economic opportunity. That is just a simple fact, that is still how it is for a lot of people. And so it feels like, you're going forward, and then you're going back, and then you go forward, and then you go back. But there's a very small stage, but if you're a developing country, this is how it looks. So you make little steps, and then you make a big leap, and then you make little steps, and you're going forward. You're still going a little forward. You keep going forward. It's not consistent, but you're going in this direction. Whereas what we do is, it's more like a waltz. That's you're moving, but you're not. It's a very weird feeling. And the question is, fate? And it's so perplexing. And why is it perplexing? Because this is a fabulous country. We like to think we're exceptional, and we truly are. Let's face it. You'd be blind not to know, firstly, that this is an incredible, it's just a gorgeous country. It has everything in it. Huge capability. We have the most advanced industry and infrastructure in Africa. Whatever I've said, we have very advanced capability, not even just in relation to the continent. So many capabilities, a population that is multilingual, which is a great competitive advantage, actually, highly energetic and positive, generally. And we brought the world heart transplants and photovoltaic cells and prepaid meters, and we export luxury cars. We've expanded our education base. We have a growing Black professional middle class. We have Caster Semenya, who against all odds multi-medalist, but most recently gold at the Olympics, the highest possible athletic accolade. We have, Rugby World Cup, all of that. So why on earth are we stuck? Now the question is, if countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Peru, Colombia, Vietnam, or Ethiopia can power ahead, they have so many of the same problems that we have. How on earth did they do it? So I want to think about the probability of lifting off. And I think that the key problem we face is unproductive ways of doing things. I don't think it's a technical problem. People in this country, they talk about the G word, like they see growth as being a swear word almost. They say, if you believe in growth, you don't care about people. I've heard that so many times, and I have to ask, why is that? People ask, is the NDP still relevant? They are cynical. Policymakers chop and change continuously before you even know if something's working or not. Or the policy isn't linked to what the aspiration is. So, we invest, for example, in capital-intensive industry instead of, going hell for leather for labor-absorbing activity. The cynicism around these things, I got to tell you, there's just not a chance that we will solve for 30% unemployment without growth, or have this kind of transformation without a plan in relation to that. But when I reflect on it, it's actually not that hard to understand, because we actually haven't had that much growth. People don't believe in it. When we did have it, it didn't spread enough. So I think a lot of people say, who is we? When we say we support the Constitution, who do you mean? Do you mean me? I think that's what people are wondering, because it's not credible. So we have this vicious circle. We say one thing, we do another, growth falls, credibility falls, citizens disengage, and then accountability reduces, and so you end up in this vicious circle downwards. So what is getting unstuck about? 3 things, and I'm going to jump in. First is moving away from zero-sum behavior. What does that mean? That's a perfect apartheid thinking. It means your gain is my loss is your gain. It's a fixed pie. That's what corruption is about, right? Versus shared purpose. Together, we can achieve more. We're firmly in a zero-sum kind of game. I think predicated on that kind of apartheid behavior that extends into today. Secondly, aligning actions consistently to shared purpose. That's what Caster Semenya does. It means if you align your objectives, you design your policy against what your objectives are. It's clear, consistent, repeatable. People start to get on board. You start to create a virtuous circle upwards. People get the project. They learn the routines. They understand what's required. They start to dream up the next round of improvement from there. And so it goes. And then this bridge that we're building starts to be able to take more weight and more complexity. And then focusing on people like we mean it. I think we focus too much on things, actually, and not enough on people. Amartya Sen said a population is only free when the population can access opportunity equitably and effectively. And the reason for that is human capability is foundational for people to be able to access opportunity and act on it, and also to be resilient when there's crisis. And the NDP was very much predicated on that notion. Of course, this is Mandela Bridge, and it was lit up through a partnership between civil society, business, and government, so people could walk across safely. So Mandela's project was aimed at taking us across, not just including the democratic transition, but also to a better life for all. That means we need to get to a more dynamic future. So we have all these obvious nascent capabilities and building blocks. How do we leverage that? Now, I wouldn't go over all the solutions, but there's 3 things I want to say that I know 100% for sure. There's no question in my mind. The first is we have to get out of this zero-sum way of being and find a way to shared purpose. If there's anything that Mandela would have taught us, that's what the Rainbow Nation idea is. Some people speak cynically about it because it didn't play out the way we had hoped. But that's what he was doing. He was creating shared purpose in the most unbelievably toxic and divided society to get us across that bridge. And we need to learn from that. Secondly, in a country with free press, voice, and the ability to participate, if you walk away when things aren't going well, I can guarantee you it's a recipe for failure. Participation doesn't guarantee success, but that grit and commitment and continuation, step by step, is what's going to make us win. Finally, people ask about growth. The only way to have sustained growth is actually to have inclusion. It is physically, whatever anybody thinks, the only way to have sustained growth is by building human capability. And the reality is the economy, economists, I guess, confuse people, and we're all trained to think about business, but it's not actually a bunch of businesses, it's actually a bunch of people doing a whole lot of things. It's actually a human system, and that's how we need to treat it to move on. Thank you for listening.